Okay, welcome everyone. So excited to have all of you here and especially to have Alysha Khan with us to talk about the new Marketo Engage Unified Experience. As always, of course, we will send out a recording after this is over, whether you were able to make it or not. So you can go back through this with a fine-tooth comb and really understand everything there is to know about the new Marketo Engage UI. I'm going to hand it over to Alysha to introduce herself. I'm also going to launch a poll so we can get a little bit of a pulse on who is using the new UI and who isn't. So you should see a Zoom poll coming your way. And I'll hand it over to Alysha.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sydney. Hi, guys. I am super excited to be here today to talk to you guys about the new UI. Just one quick thing. If you guys have questions throughout this, throw them in the chat box, throw them in the Q&A. Sydney will be more than happy to stop me at any point to ask any of your questions. So keep them coming. We want to make this as helpful as we can for you guys. So a little bit about myself. And let me just go ahead and share my screen here before I jump into that. Alrighty, so a little bit about myself. I am a campaign operations consultant here at Atumos. So what that means is I help a lot of marketing teams get their day-to-day production out into the world. I am an MCE, and as is relevant for this presentation, I'm also a little bit of a designer. I spent quite a bit of time freelancing as a graphic designer when I was young and broke in downtown Chicago. And that will be relevant very shortly. So let's go ahead and get started then. So today we are here to talk about the MU, which is the Marketo Engage Unified Experience. And you know, if Adobe ever needs a mascot for the MU, I think there's some great possibilities out here. But as you've probably heard, the new UI has inspired a lot of feelings throughout the Marketo community. And I think the main goals for today are just to kind of give you guys a good overview of all the new changes. And that's kind of why we're taking the poll right now, just to see where folks are. And just to sort of guys help you feel better and really understand what all the changes are. And if there's one big thing that I can have all of you guys walk away is that with all of these changes, the main thing that's happened is that our mental Marketo autopilot just doesn't really work well anymore, right? And what we need to do then is just simply like give ourselves some time and just be kind to ourselves as we're working through these changes and figuring it out. And especially now that the holidays are coming, just throwing some time on the calendar to just take an hour and just look around, poke around, get acclimated with the changes. And I have the poll up here. So it looks like, oh, okay, we're about pretty half and half for who is and who isn't in there. So that's super great. Now, let me back up here a step. When do you get flipped? Now, we have a community. It's called MOPS Pros. It is for marketing operations professionals. It is a Slack community. If you're interested in joining, we'll be sending out a link afterwards. But I looked around our MOPS Pros community and all the conversations that were happening around the new UI. And in terms of when folks have gotten flipped, for those of you who haven't yet, some people have gotten a heads up from their CSM and other folks haven't. And those who have gotten a heads up, sometimes it's been accurate, sometimes it hasn't. So I think that really, like, if you haven't gotten flipped yet, the next best step for you is just to start that conversation with your CSM, so you have some idea of what's going to happen and maybe try to control that conversation a little bit. But you may indeed just wake up one day and be flipped over. And that's what happened to me with a client instance. So start that conversation. And then the one thing that we do know for sure from a reliable source is that anybody with multiple workspaces is definitely getting pushed to last, because the new UI as it currently stands does not support multiple workspaces. Now, first up, we're going to talk a little bit about the visuals of it, and then we're going to dive into the functionality. So why does this bother people so much? So the previous UI in sort of design terms was what we call skeuomorphic design. And what that basically means is that the icons really represented what the activity or the task was. So think of a trash can representing delete or the floppy disk representing save. In Marketo, that equivalent was a mailbox for an email program or a literal Rolodex for a list, right? And for our purposes as, Marketo users, what that meant was that everything was very visually distinctive. And when we were looking down the marketing activities tree, we could actually absorb so much information just by scanning that, right? But what happened was that Marketo was acquired by Adobe. And they were now beholden to Adobe's design standard. And that's why the new UI had to come out. The one thing about skeuomorphic design is that it's a little old school. And that's kind of one of the reasons if you've ever logged in there and you're like, whoa, it just looks like a thing from the past. That's because the design style is very much in that vein, right? Skeuomorphic design was very popular in like the early to mid aughts. And I think another great example, for example, is that if you look at like older iOSs and more current iOSs, you can see that same shift happening. So Marketo was acquired by Adobe. They were now beholden to Adobe's design standards, and hence this new UI, which is very much based in flat design, which means that things are much more uniform, they're a little more stylistic, they're not as colorful as they used to be. And it's great in that it like looks really modern and looks like a really contemporary piece of software. But as users, what's happened now is that we've just lost a lot of visual information that we could absorb from the marketing activities tree. So to surely show you guys, I've built out a bunch of items in a demo instance that we have. So I'm going to walk you guys through that. Now, so when you log in, this is the screen that you're going to hit right away. And I think the first thing I sort of want to call out is that as we'll go through this, you'll notice that right now Marketo is this hodgepodge of the new design stuff. So these tiles over here, the top bar, and then the older design style. So the tree over here. Once we get further in, you'll see that flips. So immediately, as soon as you can log in, you can see that these icons are in the new style. They're gray now. When you hover over them, you get get a little bit of color coming back in. You see that this nav bar is completely different than what it used to be, and we'll go into that more later. But for now, we're going to hop into marketing activities. And I've got some sample assets built out here. So for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you guys can see them a little bit better. But when you log in, this is indeed sort of the size that they're at. And I think the one thing that people have definitely been struggling with is that like it's very similar, right? And that's one thing as you go through this, it's a lot of squares, it's a lot of circles, and right now I am zoomed in, as you'll probably notice, 150%, and that's just to give you guys a better view here, but they're also just very tiny. They're very tiny, they're very small, and it's hard to read a lot of that information in there. So I'm just gonna do a quick scroll back up just so you guys can get a good look at everything. And the two most helpful tips that I have found as I am working through this is to double check that I'm always accessing the right asset in the right location, and I'm doing the right action to it. Just sort of what I like to call it, just like I reorient myself that I'm doing what I actually intend to do, where I intend to do it. And then using the tooltips that they've now rolled out to help really clarify what I'm looking at. So let's just go back here for a second. So with assets like emails, forms, and landing pages, the green and yellow circles represent different states of approval. So yellow is draft, green is approved, and then this lovely little half C here is approved with draft. So that's true across forms, landing pages, and emails. And when you mouse over the circle, you can see that that is true. For email send programs, it's a little bit different. For send programs, they have like what essentially a clock icon when it is waiting to run. There is no icon when it is not launched. And then there's a little check mark when it's fully done and run. For smart campaigns, you'll notice that a batch campaign now has the light bulb icon, whereas a trigger campaign has this lightning bolt icon. And a green circle on a batch has come to represent has run, no upcoming. But the circle on a trigger is an active trigger. We switch back to the clock icon once it has run, and then we do campaign is requested, you get the little arrow. I think a couple things I would just like to note here is that now that I've zoomed back out, I think you'll be able to better tell that like those little ticky marks for the clocks and for the checks are indeed very small. So the tooltips are super helpful in mousing over that and just seeing where statuses are. One thing I've also noticed is that when something is scheduled and you walk away from it, you come back a week later, it's going to hang out on that schedule status until you click into it, and then it'll refresh into sent. Now, I know that this happened in the past, but I think sometimes it did automatically refresh by itself. However, in this case, I fairly consistently noticed that you need to click into it to get it to refresh. So definitely giving myself a few heart attacks along the way, but just click into it. And most of the time, the scheduled thing has indeed run at the appropriate time. So, and then for smart list versus static list, for example, they've got the little thing. So a lot of circles, a lot of just really gray boxes. And I think it's just really important to take the time and really look at what you're doing, where you're doing it, and then using the tooltips to get the additional information you need. Sydney, I'm going to take a quick pause here before I jump to the next section. Are there any questions out there that I can answer?
There are a few questions.
Sure.
Yeah, so there's been a few questions about Marketo Sky and what this means. Is this intended to replace Sky? Is Sky still a thing that is on the roadmap? If that's something that you want to talk to, I'm also happy to weigh in a little bit there.
Yeah, I can offer a few comments, and then Sydney, you can obviously also jump in. So Sky still exists. Sky is accessible now from your My Marketo section only. So that is the only way to get into it. From what we've understood from Adobe's comments and whatnot, the new UI is really the way forward that they are working towards. So they are going to be taking things that they have promised in Sky. We'll cover that a little bit later and pulling them into the new UI. They're going to be rolling out the new UI across all of Marketo, which we also have a little bit of that later to show you guys. So this is definitely the way forward. Whether Sky will eventually be phased out or not is not something that we really have any insight into right now. But I think that's definitely, the new UI is the way forward.
Yeah, Alysha's totally right. I have been on a couple of calls with Marketo's product team that have kind of talked about Sky and MeUI and what all of this means. And essentially, the rollout of Sky, the Marketo product team kind of learned a lot from that and how they want to roll out MeUI and all of the really cool functionality that they've been talking about for quite a while that was available in Sky or is available in Sky, like event cap and predictive audiences and all those types of things are now going to be folded into MeUI. I think the biggest difference here is that Marketo Sky was always something that you had to navigate to and was going to be kind of a huge shift to make, where this is being rolled out as a unified experience is what they call it, where it's just kind of part of the canvas. Once it rolls out, it's there for you. It's not something you really toggle back and forth right now. So I think ultimately Marketo Sky is going to go away, and this is, as Alysha said, the path forward.
All right, awesome. Any other, Sydney?
I don't think so. Oh, there were some other questions about things that I think you're going to get to later. So like, is the drag and drop going to come back?
Yeah.
And there was a question about, do you think they will change the style back to something a little more visual rather than flat because it was so helpful for visual skimming? I would say probably no. Curious if you have any other thoughts on that. Yeah.
So the thing is, what's really driving this here, and this is something that we've pulled from Adobe's own comments on their feedback page, is that this is definitely being driven by Adobe's design standard. They have to get in line with that. They are part of the Adobe family now. So they are definitely like thinking about ways to make it more friendly for users and to add some of that visual information back. But I think the fundamental bones of this are here to stay. And as you'll see later and how the rollout's going to look across other areas, it's a launching pad for how they're imagining the rest of the software going. All right, let's hop back in here. So with drag and drop, that's a great one. We're going to get into that shortly because now we'll be talking about some of the functionality changes that have been rolled out. So first of all, resizing the marketing activities trees. This is something folks have definitely noticed has been a bit of a struggle a couple different ways. So and I'll showcase this when we go back into the instance. But for most people with the folder structures that a lot of folks like to use, the default size is just too small. And then if you resize it, when you refresh the window, it sort of snaps back where it was. And then we've also heard reports that like if you make it too small for whatever reason, if you're trying to get a better view at something, it does get stuck sometimes. So just something to keep an eye out for as you work through this. Then drag and drop, much beloved, much mourned. And I think what's super interesting here is that the reason that they phased out drag and drop is that drag and drop in and of itself does not adhere to web content accessibility guidelines, right? And what that means is that those are the guidelines that help make the internet friendly for people with disabilities who access it through a disability device like an e-reader or something like that. And drag and drop just never worked for these people in the first place. And thus, Adobe and Marketo prioritized getting Marketo to be a little bit more accessible and adding that move functionality initially. And then what we've heard from their announcement is that they are planning to add drag and drop back in the first half of 2021. And then what I want to do right now is just quickly show you guys a little bit about the moving and cloning so you guys get an idea of that. So let's head back in here. And I've got a folder set up. So in order to move, it's simply a right click on the asset, and then you're going to go into move. And then you can pick a destination between marketing activities and design studio. You can pick the program you want to add it to. And then when folders are available, in this case, I don't have them right now, but you will be shown here. Now, the one other thing I want to highlight is that when you're in an asset, there is a different move that's over here I'm going to just call this like the old UI area. So when you hit this move, it's similar in that you can move between design studios and marketing activities. Oops, hang on. And in marketing activities, you can move it between programs, but you cannot move it between folders, right? So that is definitely one thing to be aware of, is that there are two different moves that are available to you here. Now, the other thing, and to sort of like cancel out or ameliorate a little bit the lack of the drag and drop, is if you now right click on a folder, as I'm doing here, and you do a new local asset, the new local asset will be created in the folder you selected, which is huge, which I feel like a lot of us you just use drag and drop to get things where they should be. The other thing, though, to note is that if you are cloning something, let's just do this really fast. It will not clone into the folder in question. So right click, new asset will be in the folder. Cloning something will always pop back into the program level. And at that point, you will need to go move and drop it into the folder in question. The other thing I do want to point out is that when this was initially rolled out, you were unable to move things into an archive folder. That has since been resolved. So you can indeed move things into an archive folder now. So all of that is to say, drag and drop is not gone forever. Fingers crossed, we will have it back very soon. The next change that I want to highlight is that your URL no longer contains your pod number. Instead, they have switched in your Munchkin ID over there. However, if you still need your pod number, and folks often look at their pod number when they're trying to figure out if there's an issue happening with their instance, if it's just them or if it's a little more global, you can find it in the URL when you're editing landing pages, forms, and emails. Now, a lot of this is simply because the UI is still a hodgepodge of the old and the new. And we have heard that Marketo will eventually have your pod number somewhere in the admin area. So this is at least a temporary way to find that pod number. I don't know how long it's going to stay that way, but we have been told that that information will eventually be found in admin. Sorting symbols or folder structures. The first time I logged in on the new UI, my folders were just a mess, total mess. And a lot of this is because the tilde, the little squiggly, no longer pushes folders to the bottom. And the underscore is now the way you need to push all your folders to the bottom. Now, an interesting little side note here is that in normal software development, in the normal software development world, the tilde is honestly not the way to do it. And Marketo created a custom way to have folders go to the bottom, or any assets really. And now with this new rollout, they sort of righted that chip, and now we're doing it the way the rest of the software development industry does it. So what we have verified, and this is true for a standard US keyboard, that this is the order of characters, numerals, and letters that will sort your folders. Now, I say standard US keyboard because we have not tested this with things like Cyrillic characters, kanji characters, currency symbols that are not the dollar sign. Actually, the dollar sign isn't. So currency symbols, not at all. So if you are using any of those in your folder structure for whatever reason, I would definitely recommend doing your own testing and figuring out what's the order that really works best for you. The top nav, as I pointed out earlier, there's been a bit of a shuffle up there. The super ball is now gone and everything is spread out just across that top black bar. Community is now a little bit more hidden. It's under help. So if you're, like a lot of us in the community a lot, there's a few extra clicks to get there. The other main thing I really want to highlight, and I'll point this out in a second when we hop back in, additional modules like SEO, for example, do not appear in that top bar. So to access it, you're going to have to go back to your My Marketo to be able to click into those areas. And then, yeah, global search and design studio changes. Let's talk about those back over here. But yeah, let's just take a quick look here. So you'll see here, I've got the standard sort of options up here, but then for SEO, web personalization, email insights, community is also over here, but those options are not available up here. So if you're ever anywhere else and you want to access those, you are going to have to come back to your My Marketo tab and access it that way. Global search is something that's actually pretty cool. Now, this isn't going to be like as nifty as I would like, just because this is a demo instance and there's not much in here. But I can definitely show you guys some of the cool filters, which I think is really the best part here. So search icon, type in what you're looking for. You can search across marketing activities, design studio, analytics, and database. But I think the niftiest thing here is all of these filters that they've got on the side here. So you can look across the type of program, the type of campaign, the asset status, if it's a template or not, et cetera, et cetera. There's a ton of great options here. And I think it's just a really great way to, like, if you're just looking for a specific thing or you want to find a certain type of thing, it's a great way to just dig through your entire instance and find the items that you need. Next, under Design Studio, they've gone ahead and alphabetized the folders. Yippee. And they've also broken out email templates and emails and landing page templates and landing pages. But I think most relevant for all of us, images and files is no longer at the bottom, it's in the middle. So if you find yourself clicking in the wrong place, don't worry. I've been doing it for weeks now. I've almost broken myself of the habit, but not quite. So images and files are in the middle and they've broken out the template folders there. So Cindy, I'm going to take another pause here before we talk about future state stuff to see if we have any questions.
Sure. There have been a few questions. I've been trying to answer them, but I think good to kind of go over them so everyone can hear. Someone asked about what a pod number is, which we briefly referenced earlier. If you want to touch on that.
Yeah, so all of our Marketos, though they are web-based, are hosted in a physical pod somewhere. So and that pod number is then referenced in your URL. So a lot of time when you're experiencing outages for example, you look at your pod number, then you can go to Adobe's website and be like, oh, the AB whatever pod is having an issue. And you're like, that's me. That's my problem. And the pod numbers and the letters correspond to real locations. So AB is Ashburn, for example, SJ is San Jose. There's international ones as well. So that is what the main use of those are.
Great. Yep. And usually the physical location or the pod that you're on is semi-aligned to your company's billing location. So like if you're on the East Coast, you're more likely to be on the Ashburn pod. If you're on the West Coast, you're more likely to be on the San Jose pod, etc. Another question we had, I thought this was a good one, not one that I had thought of, but fortunately not actually a scary thing. Will the changes to the URL, so the fact that the pod number is no longer there, affect Design Studio assets, like the hyperlinks to the assets that live in Design Studio? Will those change at all?
Oh, that is a great question.
But
So
no, because those actually don't reference your pod number. They already reference your CNAME and your Munchkin ID, and that's not changing at all.
yeah, I was
I
gonna
did have to go look at one just to verify. I was like, no, right?
yeah,
No.
I was gonna double check here to verify, but there there are no dummy examples that we didn't. But the one thing that I did, I was talking about this with somebody, and because of that URL change, if you are using, I believe if you are using a VPN to access Marketo and you start running issues with it being super slow or having other just VPN issues, I don't use a VPN, so I couldn't tell you. But if you're having those issues and you're using a VPN, that URL change could be causing some of that. So I would definitely, if you are in that bucket or you start experiencing in the future, talk to your IT because they may need to like do some changes.
We did also have one person who I think signed in just a few minutes late ask what MEUE stands for, so probably
Oh,
worth reiterating.
yes.
Marketo Engage Unified Experience, or Mewtwo if you really like Pokemon. And then one other question was, why did they reorder the design studio things? You know what? I think we all wish we knew that, but probably they should have been alphabetical from the start, I would guess. And
Fair point. Yeah,
they
maybe
weren't,
they
and now
should.
they are.
No, I mean, and yeah, some of the stuff is just changes they've made. We've just got to kind of roll with it now. So,
Yeah,
um,
and then we just had one person kind of note that they've been out of Marketo for a few months and kind of glad to see that these changes aren't as drastic as they thought they'd be. They're really not. They're kind of
not
rolling it out in a slow,
drastic. Yeah,
gradual fashion, which is
they
nice.
definitely are. And I think a lot of it is simply like the more you're in Marketo, the more you're very much used to it being in a certain way. And that's kind of why I started with that up top is like we all have this Marketo autopilot that we're on, that we can hop in there, we can quickly find the thing we want or quickly do the thing we want. And like I still very vividly remember like the first morning one of my clients' instances switched over. I had like an urgent email sent. I had to schedule it that morning and I log in there and it just looked completely different. And something that should have taken me 2 minutes suddenly took me like a good 10, 15 minutes because I was just like, whoa, what is happening? So I think it's things like that we are just like our day-to-day workflow has just been impacted. So I think like folks are struggling with it and that's really fair because change sucks, even if it's like for the better sometimes. So Sydney, I'm assuming that's the last one.
Yep, that's it for now.
All right. So this is the very last section. We're just going to talk a little bit about the future. So starting in 2021, it looks like Marketo will be rolling out this new UI design across the rest of the software. So as you can see in the screenshot here, this is their nurture program. So you can see some of that more design style being brought into the rest of the program. The rest of the software. So everything's a lot more grayer, everything's a lot more flatter. But what's nice here is that they are giving you this toggle option now down below here to go between the new and the old experience. However, that will really only impact what's in the program window. Your tree and this bar up top will indeed remain the same. And then, as Sydney mentioned earlier, it looks like they're planning to roll out a lot of the sky features that they have promised over the years into the new UI. Along with a few other cool nifty things. So I would definitely keep an eye out just to see like, what is Adobe announcing? What are they planning? And if it sounds familiar, it's probably because it's something that they've talked about over the years and now they're finally like using the new UI to get it out there for us. So that was my presentation.
I'll just like kind of add on that last note that I think this is kind of one of the things that so many of us were really excited about when Adobe acquired Marketo is that they would be able to tackle some of the real like core product functionality and features that had been talked about and requested for so long. A new UI change is always a little painful because it's just a new way of working. It's different and people don't like change, but I think ultimately this is really good. This is like a good strategic direction for Marketo as part of Adobe. And I'm really excited to see some of these things like event cap and predictive audiences and the account-based smart lists roll out in the new experience once they kind of get past this initial hump. So I think it'll be great. Someone did just ask if there are going to be any changes to the admin section of Marketo.
We officially haven't heard, but given the fact that they are slowly rolling out this across but they're slowly rolling out the new UI design across Marketo. I'm going to assume at some point that it'll affect the admin area. The one thing we know for sure is that they're going to be adding the pod numbers and your Munchkin ID sort of neatly accessible in admin. Beyond that, Sydney, I don't think we have any other official announcements about what
Yeah, I would also say that like the iconography that exists in admin right now is also pretty skeuomorphic. So I'm sure that it will
yes,
also be switched to the flat design, the design all up. Like the purple is unfortunately just going away, which is only unfortunate because I think it's sentimental for a lot of people, but this is actually a much more modern design. So it's not the worst thing.
And two quick things, Sydney. One, I've got some like official links out here, which I think we can send out afterwards.
Great.
Kimberly's got a great tips and tricks blog post that has a lot of the same stuff here. So if you're more of a visual person, we also have our own blog post that's free to read over. Then just a few of Marketo's official documentation, their official announcement post. They have a product overview doc, and then they have a feedback page, which I think has just been, it's been an interesting read. So when you're logged in, they have this big blue give feedback button. And then in here, you can take a look at the ideas that people are submitting. And what I have particularly found interesting is that as you go through it, Marketo engineers are responding back to them. So that definitely gives you a good idea. If you're as nerdy about Marketo as we are, if you're trying to get an idea of where their head is at, what they're thinking, this has been a really great resource to see what they're doing.
It is nice because I think that the Marketo product team has been much more active here than we were used to them being in the like general ideas section of community. So that's nice. I think you'll see Badja in there really, really frequently, and he's kind of the head of this initiative from their product team. Someone else asked, for instances with multiple workspaces, will all the workspaces still appear in the tree, or will it look more like the Sky experience where you have to choose each workspace? The answer to that is we definitely don't know. I'm not confident that Marketo knows yet, because the Marketo Engage Unified Experience is not going to be rolled out to people that have workspaces active in their instance until the kind of end of this rollout. So end of Q1 is what we've heard so far. Obviously subject to change based on Marketo and their product release schedule and whatever. So this is not yet compatible with workspaces. We don't know what they're going to look like, but I'm sure that's what they're actively working on now, and we'll be prepared to roll it out at that time. If you have feedback on how you would like to have that work, like if you really hated how it looked in Sky, I think you can go to this feedback page and let them know that that is your opinion on how this should work. I think that's great. There was let's see, are they going to roll out the global admin feature, such as the ability to mass activate and deactivate trigger campaigns, unschedule batches, etc.? I think that was one of the Sky features that was talked about at some point in time, if I'm remembering correctly. And the plan is, based on what we've heard, the plan is that all of the features that have been discussed for Sky at really any point in time are going to be folded into this ultimately. So I would not expect to see further development on Sky itself or features that exist in Sky today. I think everyone, my impression, again, I don't work for Marketo, but my impression based on, what we've heard from them is everyone's kind of all hands on deck on the Marketo Engage Unified Experience. All of the work that has been done on Sky is going to kind of operate as a proof of concept for things that they will do in Marketo Engage Unified Experience. So I think ultimately it'll be better than Sky.
I definitely think so. And this is sort of the list, the official list we have so far of what we know for sure will be rolled over. If it's not here,
At least in short order. Yeah.
Yeah. If it's not
here, I think it's like on the backlog. That's my impression. Cool. All right. Any other final questions? Yes, there will be a recording sent out, and the slides will also be sent out as always. Anything else, or we can wrap it up? Thank you so much, Alysha, for going through this. This was super helpful for me as someone who has not been in the UI a ton yet. And I'm sure for many other people that are either just awaiting it or have it just rolled out and they're a little afraid, as we all are when we see
honestly something. Put like an hour on your calendars. Thanksgiving is coming up, Christmas is coming up, and actually one other thing, if you have other people to train on Marketo, definitely, and you haven't been switched over yet, holidays are coming up, you will, fingers crossed, have downtime, and this may be a great time to start that conversation with your CSM, see if you can get rolled over on your schedule. and then start that training on your schedule versus like being at the mercy of Adobe and Marketo.
Yeah, totally. I think that CSMs are pretty amenable to your feedback and ideas at this point. So that's great. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Oh, and if you are not already in the MOPS Pros community, then you should be receiving a Slack invite when you get your follow-up email with the recording and such from this. And if we do content like this all the time. We have a MOPS Talk series that runs once a month. It's a little more career focused, and we do kind of one-off webinars like this that are more technical and hands-on in the product, not just Marketo, but Pardot, HubSpot, Eloqua, Lean Data, anything. And it's a really helpful place with lots of other like-minded experts. So look forward to seeing y'all there, and have a great day.